everyone. It's good to see you all on a Sunday afternoon. I am here in my Senate office, and the reason for that is that the Republicans are in the midst of trying to pass a big, ugly bill. And the short version of this bill, it's 945 pages, so condensing it a lot, is basically to take away health care from what now appears to be about 17 million people and use a big chunk of that money for giant tax giveaways for billionaires and billionaire corporations. There's a lot more to it than that, but that's kind of the heart, and everything else revolves around that. So the Democrats are pushing back with everything we've got. I mean, we are completely united on this. We are fighting. And frankly, we're trying to pick up some Republicans to fight alongside us. And so I'm up here right now because we just had a meeting in the Democratic caucus, just the Democrats in the Senate together, as we were laying out our different strategies and still talking about what's in the plan, what we know about what the Republicans have put in there, what they've taken out. In other words, you're not surprised to hear this, the whole thing is like it's still moving. They can't quite settle on the pieces because they don't have the votes for it yet. So we are figuring out how to push back. And I got out of that meeting, came over to my office, and decided what I'd like to do is just talk with some people who've been following the bill, answer questions that you all send in so that we can talk about it. And then in I think it's about an hour and a half, schedule shift a little bit, I'm supposed to be down on the floor of the Senate giving a speech about this bill. And then later tonight, maybe midnight-ish, we're going to run out of debate time for the Democrats. And then we will start voting on the bill. And we will start with amendments called Votorama. And so we may be here all night, maybe here well into tomorrow. But that's kind of the overview of what's going on right now. One of the things about the bill, just to understand why there's been so much back and forth, is that, like I said, the heart of the bill is cutting access to health care for what they've now discovered is about 17 million people, and then using a chunk of that money to do a big tax giveaway for a handful of billionaires and billionaire corporations. The trick, however, is the money still doesn't add up. That is, the tax giveaways are so much bigger even than the cost of cutting health care for all these folks, that combined with a bunch of other giveaways that they want to put in this bill, they're actually going to increase the national debt by roughly $3.5 trillion extra. So these are going to be tax cuts for billionaires put on a credit card for our children and our grandchildren to pay. And to their credit, and I really want to put it that way, there are some Republicans who are saying, what? No, that they don't want to do that. So there are lots of backs and forth in this bill and lots of negotiating to try. Frankly, the Republicans are trying to buy off Republican senators so that they can get enough votes to pass through Donald Trump's big, ugly bill. And so that's what's going on right this minute. So among the things that I'll give you one more twist that comes into this. Republicans have tried to put a lot of other stuff in this. Sometimes in the Senate, it's referred to as a Christmas tree. They try to hang other ornaments on it. So on the Christmas tree, they try to put everything they can. The problem is that what they're doing is called a budget reconciliation bill, which means, this is why, they only have to get 50 votes to pass it. It's not subject to the filibuster, but all the items have to be limited to budget-based items. And so another thing that slices through this is that the parliamentarian comes along and says on a lot of different provisions, that's not a budget thing, that's a policy thing. And just the fact that it may affect money doesn't make it a budget thing. And why is that important? Because it means that the Republicans can't leave it on this bill and then pass this bill with only 50 votes. So let me give you an example of that. That sounds pretty down in the weeds, because it is down in the weeds. The Republicans put a provision in the bill saying it's going to be easier for people to buy gun silencers. I kid you not. That's one of the provisions in the bill. And the parliamentarian came along and said, yeah, that is not a budget issue. It's she struck that out. And we've been going through a lot of those back and forth. And the thing is, the good news is we got a bunch of really awful stuff taken out. The bad news is there's still a lot of awful stuff that's still in the bill. But the Republicans haven't just given up. They haven't said, oh, well, we will stick to the straight and narrow here of just doing money, just cutting Medicaid so that we can do these tax cuts for billionaires. Instead, what they've been doing is they go back and they try rewriting. So they say, okay, how about if we put it this way? Now does it become a budget issue? How about if we do it that way? Does it become a budget issue? Mostly the parliamentarian has said no. Sometimes the parliamentarian has said yes. And sometimes it's still up in the middle of fighting back and forth. And so when I say that the bill is not fully baked, that is one of the reasons. They still literally are having fights over, even under the rules of the Senate, what can be in this bill and what can't be in this bill. And then, like I said at the beginning, the other thing they're still having fights over is they don't have the votes. And when they don't have the votes, they're using those tried and true methods of trying to buy off different senators. So there was going to be a special provision for health care for Alaska. Some were calling it the polar payoff, in order to attract the two senators from Alaska to vote for this bill. So the particular one I was talking about, the polar payoff, was a way to get the two Republican senators from Alaska to vote for the bill. And we just found out while we were in our meeting that the parliamentarians struck the provision and said, sorry, it's not a budget piece, it's a policy piece because of the way they've structured it. So now they got to find some other way to try to pull in those two Republican senators or come up with something else. So that's the kind of push and pull that's going on right now. So how about if we just talk a little bit about, when I say cutting access to health care, about what that actually means. The program that would take the biggest hit is called Medicaid. And a lot of folks actually don't know much about Medicaid. And the reason for that is that in the 50 states, in the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico, Medicaid goes by different names. In Massachusetts, it has one name. In Oklahoma, it's called Sooner Care. Every state has renamed their Medicaid program. And while that's, kind of adorable to have your own hometown team, the problem is when we're telling people from Washington, we need your help because they're about to cut Medicaid, a lot of folks look at it and say, oh, that's okay, I don't get that. And the answer is, yeah, actually you do. It is keeping your healthcare system going. So here's what Medicaid covers. Medicaid is about covering little babies. About half of all the babies in the United States are covered under a Medicaid program. So those little newborns, When mom goes to the hospital, the babies are covered, the mom is covered with her care. And that means they're covered kind of no matter what. Good, healthy, bouncing baby and out of there the next day, great. That was covered. But also the baby that's born who has real problems and can't start breathing on her own or has heart problems. You know the babies, the ones who run up $1 million in health care before they ever make it home the first time. Those are babies that are covered by Medicaid. And those are babies that sometimes their mamas and their daddies have private health insurance, even good private health insurance. But those babies hit their caps on how much the private health insurance will pay. And so Medicaid is about making up that difference. So, like I said, about half of all the babies in the United States get their health care through, it may not be called that, it may be called Hoosier Health or Sooner Health, but it's through Medicaid and through federal government support. Folks who have significant disabilities, people who are permanently disabled, people who need a home health aide in order to be able to live independently and not to have to live in a group home or an institution. Those people, typically, that's being handled by Medicaid. Medicaid is paying for the wheelchair. Medicaid is paying for the special bed they sleep in. Medicaid is paying for the breathing equipment. Medicaid is paying for the home health aides who come and who help with bathing and changing the sheets, and people who are there as a night nurse. Sometimes Medicaid is there when family does part of the work, but Medicaid sends someone so that the family gets some respite and doesn't have to be there 24/7. So folks with significant disabilities, those are folks who count on Medicaid. When I was in Massachusetts talking about these cuts 2 or 3 weeks ago, with us was a man who is quadriplegic. He uses a really high-tech outfitted wheelchair, and he spoke at the press conference we had, and he said, if there are cuts to Medicaid so that I can't get my home health aid, then I will have to be put in an institution. And he said that because he has very complex medical needs, being in that institutionalized setting, he believes, will kill him. So this is powerfully important to people with significant disabilities. The third big group that relies on Medicaid are seniors who are in nursing homes. Seniors and sometimes people with disabilities who are in nursing homes. These are often people who worked all their lives, who now maybe they've had a stroke, maybe they have a problem like Alzheimer's or dementia where they have a memory care and can't live on their own. Maybe they have no family to help take care of them, or the family just can't. And if they have no savings to cover their care in the nursing home, it's Medicaid that steps in and takes care of that. So Medicaid is the way that the nursing home gets paid for caring for people. And those are the principal recipients. You know, the way I always think about this is I always think about this up front as we don't know whose niece is going to have the baby that runs up $1 million in medical bills before she's 2 months old. We don't know whose cousin is going to get hit by a bus and end up needing round-the-clock aids and a wheelchair. We don't know whose grandma is going to outlive her savings but needs care in her final years. And so all of us in advance, we pitch in our nickels through our tax dollars and we say, if that's what happens to you, if it's your family that gets hit with the baby that needs the extraordinary medical care, if it's your family that has a beloved grandma who needs to be in a nursing home and doesn't have the savings to pay for it, that all of us will help cover those costs so that people can get the care they need. I think of Medicaid as being one of the best things we are as a nation. We say that we all pitch in some so that those who get hit hard can actually have a safety net there, a little help, a little security, and get the health care that they need. And that's what it is that the Republicans want to cut by nearly $1 trillion. Now, some of you may listen to that and think, well, okay, but it's not me. So if it's not me, I don't have to worry about this. I just want to make one more point about Medicaid. Medicaid makes sure that when people show up at the hospital, everybody pays. That is, somebody goes into the emergency room, they're having chest pains, hospital takes them in, they race them upstairs, they take care of them, they put in the stent, they do whatever needs to be done. And they count on one of three things being, one of two things really being true. One is you've got private health insurance. The private health insurance will pick up the cost. The second part of that is, and you will be able to pick up the deductible, that you've got enough money to cover that. Or that Medicaid will be there to pick up those costs for that baby, for that person with disabilities, for that senior. So we count, our hospitals count on knowing that everybody who comes in the door, pretty much, not always perfect, but pretty much, there's going to be pay, that the services they get will be paid for. And that's what Medicaid does, not just for the individual families or the individual people who get help. It's also what it does for the rest of us, because it helps keep those hospitals open and make sure that when the time comes that you're in the accident or your kid falls down and needs 126 stitches, the hospital is there, the hospital is functional, the hospital is able to pay its own bills, so that means it has doctors and nurses and therapists and all of the materials it needs and a functioning operating room, all because the healthcare system works. What the Republicans are trying to do is not just hurt the individual people, they really threaten to bring down our entire hospital system. Rural hospitals are particularly vulnerable, but hospitals everywhere are really at risk if they don't get their Medicaid money. So that's kind of the big part about why Medicaid matters. I understand we've been having some technical difficulties on being able to bring other people in to talk. So I think the deal is we're going to stop for now, and then we're going to flip back on when we get this worked out. But thank you for being with me in my office this afternoon. I appreciate it. And thanks for being with me in this fight. It's important.